Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to this discussion on spiral dynamics. We've gotten through a very basic understanding of the model from red to about yellow, and we left a couple out of there, but that's okay. Most people are going to fall into this. Anybody who falls outside of this. Maybe we'll make other videos in the future for some of these obscure ones or something. But for today, I wanted to talk about some of the ways that I use the model, or some of the ways that I've heard people talk about the model that can really be useful and practical for us. Because it's one thing to look at a development chart. It's one thing to look at a progression. It's another to realize what we can do with it. So I guess first of all, what immediately struck me when I was first introduced to was to spiral dynamics, and starting to think about the different stages that people were in, and starting to think about like where I fit into it. It started to occur to me where I was very strong at different stages in my life, and I was able to see through the lens of those times in my life where, because okay, so I guess for transparency, I would say that there's a good chance that I was probably, when I entered the adult world at 18, I was probably about blue. I really my childhood was rough enough that there were limitations to what I could learn. I was, and it's just like, I think it's part of how my dad saw the world. My dad was a pretty dutiful person. He is a military veteran. He was a steward for, a steward at Union Boss. So he was there to fight for the people, the collective of the Union. And he was there to, do his best to, prevent the abuses and to, make the hierarchy work. And so I think in a lot of ways, part of that is because I think that at least a huge portion of the way my father behaved was blue. And that's a behavior that was modeled to me. It's also very common in the Midwest. Almost everybody I knew was blue. They were very, very, very sincere followers of a religion. And that's what most of my friends were, was the Christian church. And so it's interesting to me that I have a pretty distinct set of steps that happened in my adult life where I was probably blue for a number of years, and then I progressed into orange, and anyway, I went from there. My personal journey and where I'm at isn't necessarily so important. But what is important is that by being introduced to spiral dynamics, I was starting to see this, and I was starting to see the progression. Like, I saw when I was blue, and I saw that eventually that started fading away, and taking care of myself, thinking about retirement, thinking about all the capitalistic things that I needed to do, or all of that, would happen. And I very distinctly remember I used to have those feelings I was talking about. That's why I think it's so funny to say dirty hippies are green, because that's the way I really, really saw the world for a long time, maybe a decade or more, that I was in orange, and I could not stand the idea of a dirty hippie. Like, why don't hippies do something useful? Getting together and singing and drum circling does no good for anybody. Being worried, like I was from the assumption of, global warming, no global warming, what's it matter? We probably aren't going to fix it anyway. If we are causing it, we're humans, and we're too stupid to do anything about, not too stupid, too lazy. We lack the desire, the will to behave within rules and boundaries. We just, societally, we don't do that very well. We are pretty reckless and destructive to the things we get our hands on. And it's kind of always been that way. And I guess there's an acceptance of that. And at Orange, I just didn't believe there was any sense in trying to fix it. And so I remember all of these. And the reason that's interesting is because now I can look back, and when I find somebody in the mindset of, they say something like dirty hippies, or, you have somebody like that's in blue that might be like, why is everybody a bunch of selfish pricks these days? Like, I can relate to the mindsets that I had when I was in those categories. And that's useful because of a lot of reasons. One, when somebody calls me a dirty hippie, I don't have to get mad at it anymore. I understand why they think that. I used to think that, and that's okay. They're gonna think that way. They don't understand what the hippie has learned, and so they're gonna think that way. And so I don't care. You want to call me a dirty hippie? It doesn't hurt my feelings. In fact, I'm glad you're being orange in you. Like, because we'll get to this and when we talk about personal growth and how we can utilize this and that, we'll talk a little bit about why we should actually embrace where we are rather than being so worried about what comes next. Because I was in orange for a long time. Now, can orange be gotten through very quickly? Can you go and start a business and basically learn the ins and outs and move beyond the idea of capitalism like in a few years? Yeah, people do it all the time. There are a lot of people that like learn that in college. They get a side hustle that's actually kind of successful, and that's capitalism, and they kind of leap over kind of a huge part of the world, or at least a huge segment of worldview evolution, because they get exposed to something and they have success in it while they're still learning and growing. See, and so that's why people can go through college and they can really end up pretty high in the developmental stages by simply educating and by experiencing the world in the rapid way that we introduce people to the world through experiences like college. I mean, you have to move away from home. You have to learn all new friends. You have to be exposed to concepts that you may not believe in or even know about or even reject as your own thinking. And the exposure to those kinds of things is invaluable for growth. And this is one of the reasons that we don't grow, right? Like, so I guess my personal theory is that we kind of grow by force, right? Pressure put upon us. And so what pressure was put on me when I was, let's say I was blue and I entered the world like that, what pressure was put on me to rise above that? Well, none. It was now only what was and wasn't working for me. What did and didn't put pressure on me. What did and didn't make sense to me. And so I wasn't really worried about, growing as a person. I wasn't really worried about learning more, at least not in the context of growing as a person. I've always been a curious person and I can't stop learning. And that's kind of an uncontrollable part of me that really is detached from the notion of spiral dynamics. But I also think it gives people like me an advantage in growth because I got to understand what that crazy hippie's thinking. Like, that's why that's how I would have ended up becoming a crazy hippie, right? Is I need to understand, why are there so many of these people saying all this weird, goofy, oddball shit? Why do they care so much about shit that I don't care about? And those questions led to me, I don't know, not necessarily having such harsh feelings towards them at some point. And so I think that's one of the huge advantages of a model like spiral dynamics is we can use it to gauge where people are. We can try to understand where they are, and we can try to meet them where they're at, right? We can, if I understand you're coming from something from the blue angle, well, I might just be able to make you feel responsible for something. I might be able to give you a duty, and I might be able to get my way out of you just simply by your personal belief that your duty to me as another person in your community outweighs what it is you actually want to do. And so would that be abusive? Maybe, but it also like kind of makes this kind of person happy to live up to their duty, right? Like, think of a soldier. They're just happy to go to war. They come back, you thank them. A lot of soldiers are just like, yeah, it's not worth thanking. I was just doing my job. And that's their mindset, right? They're happy to do their duty. And it's interesting because like soldiers come home and they're depressed, their duty's over, or they get hurt and discharged, man. Think about that. For somebody who's in blue, this is another way that I can develop empathy for people, right? Like I can see how heartbreaking it would be for a soldier to be sent home, that all they wanted to do was serve their country. All they wanted to do was make their fellow citizens, their fellow patriots safer and freer. That's all they wanted, was to give their life to that cause. And The military goes, your life isn't worth that to us anymore. You can't do the job anymore. And you're stripping that person of their will to live. And that's where, and that's one of the devastating things, right? So this is like one of those points that soldier would have a choice, right? They can go home and they can basically continue to die inside as their entire worldview crumbles because they can't do the one thing that's all they want to do. They could go home and do that, and many do. The rates of homelessness or the rates of self-deletion, the rates of mental illness in the soldier population, it does stand out from people that don't have that kind of a thing, or that don't have that life. And to have that life stripped from them, being everything that they wanted to work for, becomes a very real problem. And I think this is another thing that causes, like, a lot of these people, like, they'll go into, after military service, they'll go into law enforcement. They'll go into security, private security. They'll go into these other roles that they're seeking duty, right? Like, because if you're a personal bodyguard or if you're a security guard over a building, your duty is to protect that. You have a duty to a community, to a business, to something. And so and then the other choice is to actually grow beyond it, right? Like, so this soldier they could wallow and they could basically die, leading into deep depression and various problems with, their place in the world, existential crisis type territory. So that's one choice. The choice of staying in force, staying in service and duty, and moving forward with that, or they can evolve. And this is the kind of event that can put pressure on somebody and cause an evolution. And so maybe this is the kind of thing that a soldier comes home and maybe they combine the two at first and they go, well, I'm not ready to give up service and duty, but I think I need to be more worried about myself. And then they might start like a business that is a paramilitary type business, or a para-law enforcement type business, or things of that nature. There's a thing we see commonly when people come out of the military, they'll start their own business. And that's fascinating because that's almost the soldier moving on from stage 4 to stage 5. It's a kind of growth. And so we've looked at that, and that could be a moment for the soldier to grow. It can also be a moment for us to understand that soldier better. And this works everywhere, right? This works like, I had an experience like when I was in stage 5 or orange, and I was heavily capitalistic. I was out working many, many hours a week. I was focused on saving and retirement. I was focused on all of the stuff I wanted to buy for myself. And I got really, really, really sick, and I actually couldn't work for a few years. And so I had to deal with that. And in the process of dealing with that, all of the money that I had saved up, all of the stuff that I had, it started to dwindle. You got to pay bills. And so you sell things, you sell off retirement accounts, you spend the money that you were using to save up for other things. And basically between getting sick, being forced out of the workforce, and divorce, I literally lost everything I had. I was probably on pace to retire 45, 50 years old. And I lost everything. And that was a place where I had a real problem. And it was a place where I did the depressed and felt useless, and I couldn't work. I couldn't participate in the system, the worldview that I believed in, because I believed in capitalism. I believed in everybody earns their way. Everybody works harder. If you work and you seek opportunities, you can get ahead. And that was my focus. And that was stripped from me without my choice. Just like I was talking with the soldier, like if he gets refused to being able to continue to serve, he's got this crisis. Well, I had that crisis in Orange, a big, big crisis. It was horrible. And I'm not even convinced that my illness wasn't caused by the crisis. I may have, I kind of started realizing I have enough stuff. I don't need more. I don't want to waste my life working like this. Like I kind of started having those realizations before I got sick. So I don't know for certain that I wasn't on the path to midlife crisis and just complete breakdown on my own. But how useful would it have been if I understood some of this then? How useful would it have been if I was sitting there facing the entire completeness of my world being collapsed around me? What if I understood spiral dynamics? What if I understood that maybe I could use that as a growth opportunity to go from the orange level I was in to green, which seemed absurd, right? Because like I distinctly remember hating dirty hippies, but during that time I was sick. I couldn't do much. I would watch, TV or play games on my phone, just trying to get through it. And eventually throughout that crisis, I was in bed for 4 years. Eventually in that crisis, I think I started moving beyond orange. I started moving beyond money is the end all be all. I started moving beyond the search for opportunity and personal gain. I moved past that. And I just wonder how much pain I could have avoided had I understood the idea of personal development. Now, like I read books, don't get me wrong. I read books, but mostly I read financial books. I wanted to learn how to handle money, how to work with money. I read books about programming. I read books about career and career management. I read books on entrepreneurship and investing and all of, like I was always looking for information. So it's like I've always been like a little bit in the, like, I don't know, I want to learn more territory, but I didn't start getting deliberate about self-help. It was probably about the same time that I got into understanding what spiral dynamics was. And so now when I am thinking about my personal growth, when I am thinking about the hardships I face, it is a time that I will spend time. So this is where we start getting into like how to use it for personal growth. I'll start using it where I'll go and read about the levels that I aspire to, or the levels that I don't think I've completely achieved. Because like on the one hand, I've said all of this. And so by this point, you may be thinking that I may be well on my way into green, maybe higher, maybe not. But just understand there are parts of me that are still lesser. Like a whole person, like a whole person isn't generally going to be all green. And you can find tests online for this. You can rank yourself in spiral dynamics and it'll kind of give you some pointers of like, here's what you scored in these different ranges. And I guess by monitoring that, I'm monitoring my progress. I try to I often read levels that are near me or above me, trying to understand like, okay, I remember that concept and I kind of forgot about it because it didn't make sense to me, but I could actually see why somebody might see that. Like kind of like, so like even people that are green are going to start having like a line of sight to some of the yellow things. And like yellow people start getting really concerned about the complexity of systems and how complex everything is, and realizing that there's no such thing as a simple answer to a complicated system. And I started getting to a point to where I actually started feeling frustrated by people that think things have simple solutions. Like I get frustrated by the idea that there are people out there that thinks that tariffs are going to fix global trade. That makes absolutely no sense in a large scale system. You can't just tinker with one thing and expect the system to do what you want. It's not going to happen. That's not how it works. This is a complicated, intricate thing. This is a world economy. There's more than 8 billion people on this planet, and we think just fucking poking at some fucking pricing we can control the economy. That's absolute lunacy. But we have people doing that. We have people that believe in that. And we're in the middle of crises about this. And I don't know that it's malicious. I don't think it's any more complicated than you can see the behavior and you can follow the money and you can see what's going on, and you can use spiral dynamics to look at this. I guess I'm not going to totally get into my opinion, but like, I just think that there's a lot of people that don't have the development to understand that things are so complex. And so they want black, white, yes, no answers on things that it doesn't even make sense to look at the questions in black and white. You can't look at the world economy and go, can I make the world economy better? Yes or no? Like, this is a dumb question, but not everybody knows that. Not everybody understands that. Not everybody has the mind that can get there. And so when we're talking about it from this personal growth perspective, and I'm looking at the things around, I also can look at, let's say if I assign myself like to maybe a well-involved green, do I get all of the concepts of green? Are some of the concepts in green starting to lose interest? Am I like even though I'm probably a lot green, I guess I'm to the point where I'm frustrated with the people that are just concerned about carbon footprints. I think that they're small thinkers now. Whereas a few years ago, all that mattered was a carbon footprint. And that led me in a lot of weird directions and made me, make decisions in my life. I was vegan for a while. I was very concerned about carbon emissions. I was very concerned about carbon footprints. I was very concerned about global warming. And those ideas are starting to lose value for me in a sense. Not that I don't think it's important to value the world. It's that I don't think that the problem of global warming is a problem of carbon directly. Well, it is. Well, I mean, okay. I think it's indisputable that it is a product of carbon and methane. Like I don't even think that's disputable at this point. Carbon and methane are growing in the atmosphere and in the oceans. And this is causing a warming effect, and it's going to accelerate now that the oceans are pretty saturated with these gases. But that's not where I'm interested in spending my energy. Not because I don't think that's a problem, but because I think there are dozens of problems that share a root cause. And that root cause is we as humans are irresponsible. If we were responsible humans, we'd all be taking the global climate crisis seriously. We'd all be worried about wanting to live or wanting our children to live if we all had this understanding, but we don't. And so I'm more concerned with trying to understand and learn why it is humans are so irresponsible, and if there's any way we can organize to deal with that irresponsibility. Is there a way to get out of this through changing human outlook? And I guess that's part of why I'm here. This is one of the reasons I talk about spiral dynamics. Maybe we can change enough people's minds over time to where people will actually care about these things that are important. They'll start realizing that you don't focus on the symptom like global warming, you focus on the problem, which is human mass irresponsibility. That comes from so many places. That's a complicated issue that I'm not going to solve today. I don't know if I can solve it in my lifetime. I don't know if me and 50 other people with billions of dollars could solve it in our lifetimes. But that's where my problems are focused at. I'm worried about fixing humanity so that we stop doing all these stupid things. Because global warming isn't our only irresponsibility problem. Plastics all over the place, another one of our irresponsibilities. The way that we've spread nuclear material all over the world, just detonating nuclear bombs without thought of how it's going to do, more human irresponsibility. And where does it end? We dump trash everywhere. We dump whatever waste we want into the ocean. We got a goddamn continent of garbage out there. We just don't give a fuck. And how do we change that? How do we correct that? Because if we don't correct that, we're going to find a way ourselves to kill ourselves, whether global warming does it or not, whether pollution does it or not, whether breathing smog does it or not, whether batteries and lithium starting on fire, wiping out the world and a global fire happens or not. Like, we're going to find a way to irresponsibly kill ourselves with nuclear weapons. Like, we're going to, like, it's our irresponsibility that's going to kill us. And so I don't really, like, global warming is an interesting thing to be concerned about. It is a problem we should be more concerned about, but we're too irresponsible. And we got to solve the irresponsibility problem before we can even solve global warming. And so while I have that mindset, I wouldn't say I'm like not, I don't have lesser tendencies, but I am aware, or I am trying to stay aware of what old ideas that I had, and not just clinging to them for the sake of, okay, that feels good to be mad about global warming. It feels good to want to do something to better the world. Well, instead of relying on that, really thinking it through and really choosing where to spend my energy is one of the ways that I keep evolving and growing. Staying aware of what's in my phase, or views that I hold a little too strong that are in prior spaces. I would say that one of my, like, I have an irrational tendency of true disdain for abuse of authority, to the point that I'm even wondering if I'm supportive of, like, capital punishment in the case of abuse of power of someone that has authority over others. So this would be like abuses of power that actually are against, the will of what the people want. The actual abuses, rights violations on scale. I sometimes want. I'm not going to say I am pro capital punishment, but I think about that, and I wonder if that's not a weird stuck tendency where I want to enforce what I think is right with deadly force. And so I have to be aware of that, and I have to be aware that I somewhere have within me something that is stunted that makes me hold on to this, because I don't think an enlightened person, I don't think an enlightened yellow person is very likely going to be pro death penalty if they really hold the worldviews through and through of yellow. And so this is another way that I use to, maybe that's not monitoring my growth. Well, I guess it is monitoring my growth, because if I let go of those feelings, if I go through this and I find a way to get past those feelings, then I can grow beyond that. And maybe these tendencies that I have that are stuck in red, and I have some stuck in blue too. I'm a person that if people want my help, I'll probably give it, and maybe to a point that I'll allow them to abuse me a little bit over it. And that's another thing that I've been working on is this blue mentality of service to others somehow trumps my needs or what I want to do, and I'm not saying that that's unhealthy, but it is unhealthy when you're willing to take abuse over it. And that's a point that's a place I still reside, is a willingness to take abuse, to serve. And I like to serve. And sometimes if that abuse is saving somebody else from abuse, I even enjoy the abuse. Like, I enjoy that, well, at least it's me taking it and not someone else. And maybe those are because, like, a blue's going to be a lot harder for me to let go of, right? Like, when I stopped growing as a child, that's where I was. And so everything since then has been a struggle for me to get through, to learn about, to grow through. And I've had to be more deliberate about growth since becoming an adult than when I was a child. When I was a child, it was just, you grow the way you're taught, more or less. So what else is spiral dynamics useful for? I guess it's just useful for me to understand. I mean, I just like understanding. I just like how I guess my favorite part of spiral dynamics is that I get to just look at everybody as children. And no matter who and what they are, They're as grown as they are, and that's it. And I don't really use it as a place to judge people. Like, I don't think red people are bad. I may think their parents are terrible people, or the orphanage that they grew up in is terrible, or the uncle that abused them, whoever caused the traumas, whoever failed to teach the children, I would blame those people far more than I would ever blame the person who's stunted in red or blue, because it's not really their fault. Like, we have all of the knowledge to get people through these stages, and yet we choose not to. We choose to abuse each other instead. And this is even a bigger problem, right? Because this is like when religious texts talk about the generational curses, right? I think this is what they were talking about, where I don't blame, like, it was my father's fault for only teaching me to a point to where I could only grow to blue. It was his job to teach me. It was his job to prepare me for adulthood. And whatever I didn't learn when I got to adulthood is kind of on him. But he was also abused as a child. Worse than I was, because, obviously parents, I'm not going to abuse my child as much as I got abused. And so that was a thing. And so him abusing me wasn't really his fault either. It was his parents' fault. And how far back does that go? The Bible suggests that curses like these last 7 generations. I'd suggest that they may be unendingly perpetual. I mean, how does a bloodline recover once it's been tainted with stunted growth and nobody knows how to get past blue anymore? The entire family is just all stuck in blue. I think I have family members that are red. Like, I think I have family members that they would absolutely steal from me in a heartbeat. They would absolutely do something harmful to me if it was going to gain them. I believe that I have several family members that are like that. And I'm not mad at them, because I know the family members that taught them, and I know the family members that treated them the way that they treated. And how do you blame somebody for being mistreated? How do you fault somebody because they never got the opportunity to learn what I learned? And I'm not saying that I give people a pass either, because once you are an adult, it is your responsibility to figure out how to grow and how to figure out to operate in the world. But when you get to the adult world and you're crippled, I don't tend to resent that. I don't tend to be angry at it. Maybe I pity it. Maybe I am empathetic for it. Maybe I wish I could do more. And maybe that's why I'm out here talking about it. That's why I talk about these things. This is why I share my thoughts on growth. Maybe somebody will listen to me that hasn't found somebody else that they can listen to. I don't know. I'm not looking to really have all the answers. I'm just looking to make the world a better place. And I think that treating people with the respect and dignity of trying to understand that they probably aren't cruel, rude, malicious people. They're probably just abused children at heart. Anyway, with that, this has been quite the introduction to spiral dynamics. I hope you learned something. I hope you have some ideas about how you can become a better person. And I really hope this alleviates some of the frustration or anger that you might have towards fellow man that is just hard to understand sometimes. I hope the insight's there, and I hope that we can all learn more about these kinds of things together in the future. Until next time, be well.